Thank you with the boys, Aaron Ward, Dave Poulin, and Bob McKenzie. If you're old enough, you'd remember Wayne Gretzky's first game in the NHL, or the next generation, it's Eric Lindros or Sidney Crosby. But tonight, double your pleasure. Really the first time that two
From Sid the Kid to the great one, TSN's James Duthie has interviewed the biggest names in sports. It's a journey that took 4 years of journalism school, 8 years of local news and sports, and hundreds of hours of hard work before finding his place on the panel. Duthie shares some of his favorite behind-the-scenes sports stories in the brand new book, The Guy on the Left. Congratulations. Thanks for coming in. This is great of you to do this. And this is kind of day one of your tour. And you had a late night last night, too, watching all those crazy games.
Well, the book is entirely about the seventh inning of last night's game. I stayed up all last night. We rushed it to publishing. That's a way to sell some coffees. No, that was an unbelievable. That was one of those. We only have probably a handful of where were you moments in our lifetime, like Joe Carter's home run for the Jays, but that was one last night for Batista. I was at my daughter's soccer practice, and there's a little bar. It's an indoor dome, and I don't think there was a single parent watching soccer. There was about 100 people crowded in that bar, and it was ridiculous.
But you've had that front row seat to sporting history, and to detail it in the. I mean, there's so many stories that you've got.
Right.
I don't know how you would, kind of boil it down to the few, but I have to ask you, when you talk about sporting moments in history, our Canadian hockey team in the 2010 Olympics and gold, and you talk about that in the book.
Yeah, that's the opening chapter, because I think the entire Olympic experience, which we shared together, was one of probably the highlight of my career. But that moment, we had our set. They built this really cool set that was right behind the Zamboni entrance, so about 30 feet away from where Crosby scored the goal. And my son had a big hockey game back home. And so I kept trying to check the score. And so during that actual moment, there was kind of a lull in the game, and I was looking down at my phone trying to get a score, and I actually heard Crosby yell, "Iggy!" that now famous phrase, and looked up just in time to see the goal. So I almost missed one of the greatest moments in Canadian sports history to get a Pee Wee hockey score.
We mentioned you've interviewed the best, and you've worked with the best, and you talk about some of the folks on your panel. I want to ask you about some of your thoughts when you, Bob McKenzie.
Well, the best, legend, but he's also very tough. I tell a story about, like, fans. If you Bob is the nicest guy in the world.
But don't rush him.
But if you try to jump on the set, which some people have done, Bob will pummel you. He will pummel you. I sometimes expect to see a tweet someday. Bob's the hockey insider that says something like, new contract for Crosby confirmed. By the way, I just beat a guy to death with my iPad or something like that.
It's because he did something. Darren Dreger.
Very sickly funny. That's what people don't get, because he's so professional. He will take your phone away and change the language to Mandarin or something like that. So he's one of the ultimate pranksters, but terrific guy.
And you guys all have so much fun. And you go back to the beginnings, talking about what you might have been, what you wanted to be. But let me take you to being a general assignment reporter in Ottawa, and how you felt about your career at that point.
Well, I thought, first of all, I hated politics and all the things you had to cover. I was the lowest of the low on the totem pole I was the guy who covered, like, the cow milking contest in the Ottawa Valley, basically. But all I wanted to do was basically be a local sports reporter. But I wrote a couple of chapters about local news, because it was very Ron Burgundy-ish. Not in the sense that
you say that is a kind of part documentary.
Yeah, it was. Like, the wacky things that happened there were just, it's ludicrous. Local news is a whole fascinating world outside of sports. And it was a great time in my life. And I think it actually taught me how to be a much better anchor and reporter and how to write, but it was very wacky.
There's so much to tell, and there's always so little time to tell. They need to pick up the book. There's so many stories. One of them has you called your mother to get the weather so that you could, because you
They taped over the weather one night in the old days before the internet, and I had to call my mom and relay the weather from my mom to the anchor, Lee Chappell. So that was the night my mom did the weather on local TV in Ottawa.
And we've got some wonderful, kind things to say about Max Keeping as well. James, thank you.
Thanks for having me in,
this morning. You'll find The Guy on the Left on our iBooks page. Head to itunes.com/CanadaAM.